future's here and now. Here comes the countdown. Sounding off this physical, rising revolution. It's our time to change it all. Rising revolution. Unite and fight to make a better life. Everybody, one for all. Sound off, this is the call.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Today we have a video by a new user to the YouTube community, a lovely young woman by the name of Nicola Vogel, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, who has taken the time to make a video explaining why she sees herself as a feminist and does it with a great deal of politeness and consideration towards those who would view her message. And for that, Nicole, as a man, an anti-feminist, and an egalitarian, I would first like to thank you for your manners and honesty given the breadth and complexity of this topic. Far too often, a great deal of feminists spout off their talking points with an utter disdain and hatred toward us without taking our feelings into account, or rather, without giving a rat's puckered prostate as to how we're going to react to such aggression. Then they react surprised when it gets thrown back into their faces. So please take this video not as an outright slam against your beliefs, but more as a counterpoint to your debate, to open a dialogue so we both may learn a few new things. Already you have taught me a few things regarding the laws of the United States that I was not aware of. I am a Canadian, just so you're aware. But I digress. Please, take it away, Nicole.
Feminism, a word which has become a synonym for man-hating, a word which has lost its power because of the whole stigma around it, and a word which women are afraid to identify themselves with nowadays. The actual definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of the equality of the sexes. And why is a concept meant so positively perceived so negatively?
Well, that's a very valid question, and the answer is actually quite simple. All too often, it's the actions of those who take an ideology to an extreme will overshadow those who hold the true ideals of feminism to heart. These individuals use this as an excuse to point the finger and release whatever pent-up hostility they have at society and at those around them in order to validate what they see to be true, often falling into the mindset that the ends justify the means. As a result, the meaning of feminism becomes twisted and mutilated into a mockery of what it actually stands for because, as with life, actions often do and will speak louder than words. One of the common comparisons of feminism is to Nazism, the latter being the social party movement of Germany. But nowhere in the definition of Nazism do you find anything to do with gas chambers and holocausts. It's the same with how feminists will automatically revert to the dictionary definition of feminism to validate their motives. Remember, the ends do not justify the means. You can say it's one thing all you want, but your actions basically tell the world the opposite.
I am certain that I am a feminist, and while I choose to be a feminist, there are other women who choose not to be a feminist just because they are afraid they will be called a man-hater. They fear that they will be called a man-hater just because they fight to get the same payment that men get just for the same jobs. They fear to be called a man-hater just because they have a strong divergent opinion that may differ from those of men's. And they fear to be called a man-hater just because they want to make decisions about their own body.
You're quite correct. The stigmatism which has been bonded to feminism by extremists does cause a lot of women and even men to not want to be associated with such an ideology. So, might I offer this alternative? Egalitarianism. The definition of egalitarianism, according to the Merriam-Webster, is first, a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic affairs. Then secondly, a social philosophy advocating the removal of inequalities amongst people. Kind of sounds the same as feminism, doesn't it? But there are key differences here that actually set it apart. The first is they don't refer to a specific gender. Instead of men and women, they just say people. And this can be applied to all sorts of inequalities out there among the spectrum. Age, race, gender, religion, sexual preference. It's an all-inclusive philosophy that allows everyone equal footing in any discussion. As for your fear of not being paid the same as a man, that is not an issue in the United States given the federal law called the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was put into effect by John F. Kennedy. It was then reinforced in 1973 and then again in 1977 when discrepancies were discovered. Then, in 2009, under the Obama administration, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was put into effect, permitting women to sue employers for unfair pay up to 180 days after receiving an unfair paycheck. Then again, on the 29th of January 2016, Obama signed an executive order obliging all companies with at least 100 employees to disclose the pay of all workers to the federal government, with breakdowns of pay by race, gender, and ethnicity. The goal is to encourage employers to give an equal pay for equal work and by increasing transparency. And that's just within the United States in the last 53 years. I provided a link below. So with all these laws already in place, the wage gap you're referring to is nothing more than a persistent myth you get when you flat out put the year-end earnings of men and women side by side without adding in all the factors. What you have instead is an earnings gap. Mixing the two is a common misconception until you stop to take things as job types, hours worked, full-time versus part-time, vacation times, overtime, merit systems, relative personal danger, and a whole host of other factors that drop the gap down from the fabled 77 cents all the way down to 3 to 7 cents, depending on who you hear debunking it. And that last few cents can be attributed to things like commission, quality versus quantity bonus of work done, and basic pay negotiations upon hiring. Now, bear with me. You may honestly think that there's a conspiracy to actually pay women less than a man, but stop and think about this honestly for a moment. If there really was a conspiracy to pay women less than men, let's face it, why would anyone even bother hiring a man if you can get a woman to do the job cheaper? Businesses want to make money, and a huge cut to their profits are the wages. It's simple economic logic at this point. As for the right to their own bodies, women here, I'm sorry to say, are extremely privileged over men in this regard. Yes, you have the right to say what does and does not happen with your own bodies, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling of Roe versus Wade, and I would not dream of taking this from you in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, it gives women an unfair advantage over men when it comes to the subject of parental rights. This, unfortunately, is a problem that has yet to be solved. As it currently stands, a woman can choose to give up their parental rights to the child. Men, on the other hand, do not. Should a woman choose to have an abortion, she with it has the right to strip a man of his right to be a father, regardless of his wishes to be one, and take sole custody of the child. Or force him to pay her child support for said child until it reaches the age of 18. It doesn't really sound very fair, does it? Personally, I see the latter as a form of modern enslavement that should the man not wish to be a father, but that's just my personal opinion. I have a solution for this that would be equally beneficial for both parties involved, but I'll save it for another video.
I do think that we all deserve the same respect, men and women, and I am very fortunate that I can say that I do get the same respect that I deserve and that I do get all the opportunities to go to school and to share my ideas, but there are still women all around the world, in other countries and even in mine, that cannot say the same. They do not get the respect they deserve. And I think that is why it is our human right to stand up and to fight for each other. And it's not only a fight of us women, it's a fight of everyone. We should all fight for each other's rights because we are all human. Let's make feminism popular again because we all deserve the same respect, men and women. Just this is not only our fight, and that is why feminism also stands for the fight of boys who want to play with dolls. They also deserve to do that, and they also deserve the same respect, just as young adults who want to express their feeling. They should not be less masculine than boys who are tough and don't express their feeling. And just like dads who want to stay at home instead of working, they should be able to do that too without any of those things damaging their masculinity. This is something for the whole world population. It is not about making women equal to men. It's about making humans equal to humans.
I agree wholeheartedly. And feminism does have its rightful place in the world. And I commend you and encourage your wish to spread a positive message to those corners of the world. But unfortunately, it's no longer needed in Western society, Nicole. It has become such a success that it has become redundant, which is why people are turning a blind eye and wishing to distance themselves from the movement. And why such a stigma has fallen on it from those who see the need to continue fighting when there is no longer an enemy to wage war upon. It's sadly become a casualty of its own success. And this is where egalitarianism steps in to take its place.
Yeah, women did not have the right to get birth control while married until 1972, and they weren't allowed to sue for sexual harassment until 1977, and they weren't even allowed to refuse having sex with their spouse until 1993.
Now here is where I'm going to admit my ignorance, and I was inclined to do a little digging around on these points, so I'll place some links below for each point. First, Nicola is referring to the fact that until March 22nd of 1972, the court case of Ellenstride versus Baird, and in my reading, I must offer a small correction, Nicole. In 1965, unmarried women were not allowed to receive birth control until Baird won his famous court case in 72. But during that time, if you were married, it was perfectly legal. As for sexual harassment in your second example, I was going to make a correction and cite this example of William versus Saxby of 1976, which established sexual harassment as a form of sex discrimination when sexual advances by male supervisors toward a female employee, if proven, would be deemed an artificial barrier to employment placed upon the one gender and not the other. But I believe you're referring to the case of Alexander versus Yale, in which occurred in 1977. This was a case of a teacher using his position of power over 5 students who came forward. Now, your third point really threw me for a loop. I wasn't even aware this was a problem to be so recently fixed. But then I grew up with a healthy respect for women and the understanding that no means no regardless of the situation. It's a bit much for me to get into at this point, given that her mention of 1993 was the date that all 50 states made marital rape illegal. It actually started much earlier in 1984 in New York in the case of People versus Liberta. But this is where I also must burst the proverbial bubble. While marital rape was legal at the time, assault and battery with serious physical injury, also known as rape, was not. It was still as illegal, and the man would be charged for doing so to his wife, but it was just not classified as rape under the definition of the law. So just because something wasn't illegal doesn't mean that everybody did it. In Texas, even today, zoophilia, aka bestiality, is still legal. But everyone is not going out and having a good time with the herds, because the general intelligence of the population already can figure out that, hey, it's not something you should do. Thus, it's just not done. Or so rarely that these cases are considered anomalies. No law has yet been put into place to make it illegal. You also make a lot of valid points about the past and how women's rights have struggled to where they are today. And it's reached a balancing point. But in some cases, it actually is tipping in the opposite direction. But while some things have only been recent changes, a lot of feminists seem to be of the mindset that these inequalities are still running rampant. Unfortunately, for them, they're not.
I do not want to take for granted that we do have those rights now, but what about the rest? What about all the other rights we yet have to receive? That's why I think we should all fight for each other's rights, and we should all help each other to be the best version we can possibly be, and we should all help each other to be who we want to be and not who we are portrayed to be. We are all human. It are the people who do not assume that you will walk less miles just because you are a girl. It are the people who do not assume that you will do a less good of a job just because you are a girl, and that you are less smart or that you are weaker just because you are a girl. Those are the people who are feminists, and those are the people who are making a difference in this world. We live in a world where 50.4% of the world population is occupied by male and 49.6% is female. In a world where the difference between female and men in the world population is so little, why is the difference in our rights so big? That's why I think we should all stand up, and yeah, it's about making humans equal to each other, and we should not be afraid to stand up and say I am a feminist, because feminism is not about man hating, and I can only hope that my words will help you stand up to make feminism popular again and take the man hating out of feminism.
And I agree, but in the Western world, women are equal. It's the rest of the world does not follow this standard. But these are only in countries where Western culture is not pervasive. The rest of the world follows mostly Eastern ideologies and practices where this type of segregation is common and everyday events. I am in no way agreeing with this. In fact, I often find religion to be a cornerstone of this form of stagnation. And until these areas decide to catch up with the rest of us and open their eyes via outright revolution of the sexes, or an honest review of religious dogma and reworking it for modern times, the struggle of feminism will never truly find a place to rest. So this begs the question, is feminism needed in the world? And I would have to say, yes. Yes, it is. But not here in Western society. I'm glad you recognize that you have rights and freedoms in the rest of the world that other women do not. And I commend you on your efforts to pull the hatred of the term out of the mud from which it is sadly sunk in Western society. But here, in Western society, it must be allowed to die and move on. Unfortunately, today's generation of third-wave feminism has taken this ideology and found that with nothing to actually fight, they must now begin to manufacture grievances to keep their validity rather than expend the effort to bring it to countries that are needed. But you, Nicole, you are the future. You can revitalize this ideal and give it the glory it once held. But to do so, you need to take it to where it's needed and where it can grow. I'm reminded of a quote by Angelo Sedanatellis from his book Origins. Quote, "Choose your battles wisely, and remember, what the heart knows walks far from reason. It simply is." End quote. What I believe Angelo is trying to say is simply, be proud of what drives you forward and hold it close to your heart. But be aware when your actions are needed and when you should hold back. A battle won, though satisfying, may cost you and your cause more than expected later. And you, Nicole, are off to a great start. You're lovely to listen to, earnest, pure of heart, and intention. Never lose that. I know that you're just starting out in the YouTube world like I am. So, from one starter to another, here's a few hints to help make your videos a little better. First, since you're using a camera, try to project your voice a little more so the mic can pick you up, or get a lapel pin mic. Try to look at the camera instead of your image on the screen. It'll give the viewer an impression like you're addressing them directly, and it allows them to make more of a connection with you and your message. Some movie making software might be a good idea to help so you can do multiple takes of a points. And you're not trying to get it all perfectly on the first try. Scripting this response to you took me 2 days, 4 to 5, since I wanted to wait until after the election to see if I should make a mention of Clinton or not. Then you would have the recording and the editing. Take your time and don't worry about how long it takes to get your message out, because when it comes out, it'll speak for itself. Secondly, when making claims and statements, it's a good idea to show your work like I have. Take your time and do your research. You'd be surprised what you can find out there that may help your narrative in other ways. Or you might realize that you got some bad info and need to change your position in light of it. Make sure to post links to your claims below in the description section, so those who would like some extra info on your talking points can follow your line of reasoning. Plus, it helps to avoid straw man arguments and copyright claims. Always stop to think when you're making your statement that there's going to be someone out there going, citation please. And third, when talking about feminism, try not to put such a separation between the genders. If feminism to you means equal rights, speak like you believe it. Remember, equality means everyone together, not segregation. I've left a link below to a video series done by a YouTuber called Sargon of Akkad. In it, he answers the very same questions that you've asked as put to the world by Emma Watson at the United Nations. He can be a little blunt, but he does make some good points. And I think it's why a lot of feminists have gone off the reservation, so to speak, and placed feminism in such dire straits that it has come into. Yes, we need the emotional energy and the drive, and the heart gives us the power to do a great many things. But without the knowledge and the reason to back it up and guide the sword of truth, the target you wish to strike will always elude you. But then, what do I know? I'm just the devil in the details. Thank you, take care, and good luck to you in the future.